Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have one of my YouTube friends here with me. I've been meaning to interview him for quite a while. This is Carlin Cook. He does a lot of horror movie reviews on his channel. He's been a YouTuber for how many years?
I don't even fully know. I think like 7 years maybe now.
Oh
But like
wow.
doing the horror stuff, it's probably been closer to like 5 or 6.
Okay, okay.
So yeah.
Is there anything I left? Feel free to, help with the introduction, contribute. Anything that I left out that you wanted to mention?
Well, I mean, I just started my channel doing well, it was mainly for a craft beer podcast that my wife and I now do. Just because I wanted to do like little videos on the side of trying like one beer at a time and kind of talking about it. And then, as interests kind of change, you just kind of move over to something else. And I was like, oh, I kind of like horror movies. So I started reviewing horror movies, but that was right after I went through the stint of liking to do mystery box unboxings, and it was always like horror related. So my channel's been like a mix of things, but it is primarily horror movie reviews now. Although I do some tasting videos for like, snacks from around the world. That's like my shorts. And then my craft beer podcast I do put up through YouTube as well at this point, even though it's available other places too. But it's kind of like a catch-all. It's like
Yeah.
whatever I'm interested in at the time is what's going up, but it is primarily horror movie reviews. So
Yeah, same. People ask me like if I have like a niche or like a certain goal for my channel, and I'm like, I just create videos that I would want to watch.
yeah, sure, sure.
So is that kind of how your content creation started? Was with the podcast?
Yeah, it was. And then, I just kind of ended up petering out on that, but was like, I kind of still like doing videos.
Mhm.
So what else can I do? And then I got very interested in mystery boxes. I thought that was fun because they were hot for a few years. So then I got
Oh.
in on that, and that was a real good time. And then I started being like, I have a lot of things to say about horror movies. So then I started doing that, and I was doing very in-depth horror movie reviews of typically older films, especially because like newer films I didn't want to do spoiler stuff, so I could get spoilery and talk in depth like I wanted to about older films. But lately, like over the past year or so, I've started to skew way more to doing newer movie reviews and have them like no spoilers,
Yeah.
but also be able to kind of like walk that line of saying enough that people would really get it if they watched the movie already, but having it kind of vague enough that people who haven't watched it wouldn't really have anything spoiled for them. So, and part of the reason I made that change is a little bit to help me with my life work balance, because you don't want your channel to kind of overtake you. And I was putting a lot, probably too much, into those longer videos, and I felt like I really needed to kind of step it back for my sanity. So yeah,
So you kind of found yourself getting some burnout. I know
yeah,
YouTube burnout is kind of a thing.
yeah. Well, it didn't feel as much like burnout as it did just like ramping up my anxiety issues, because I just like perseverate constantly on like I got to get a certain amount of videos done in a certain amount of time and get them up, and stuff like that, because I have anxiety problems, that I've talked about that on my channel as well. But those sorts of things really drive it. I'm one of those people who I create the anxiety for myself. Like I'll set myself a schedule that I can change at any time, but then because I've been doing it for a certain amount of time, I just naturally feel like I have to continue it, and then I put pressure on myself. So, you know. So every now and then you just got to step back and be like, okay,
Yeah.
I can change this. I don't need to do this right now this way. Let's tweak it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Ever since I was a
Yeah.
kid, I've had anxiety. Well, my mom was a very anxious person, and I think she was one of those parents that kind of viewed anxiety as a motivator to make your kid do better. And so as an adult, I've been trying to do better at being patient with
Yeah.
myself and,
Yeah.
like you were saying, just not feeling like just because you set a deadline for yourself, it does, you can change it anytime you want with
Yeah.
your channel.
Well, and the hard thing for people like us, because we're close to the same age, is that we were raised by a generation of people who didn't really have therapists available to them, and
Yeah.
also kind of lived with this societal norm of don't tell other people about your problems. If you're having any issues, just bottle it up, don't deal with it. Just put your head down and keep going forward, you're going to be fine. And I've openly talked to my parents about this before, how like I have anxiety problems because of how they raised me, but I don't fault them for that because that's all they knew.
Yeah, yeah,
So they were doing the best that they could, and I tell them
yeah,
this. I'm like, I don't fault you at all. Just I have anxiety problems because they raised me thinking that you should be a perfectionist, because both of them kind of
yeah.
are. Where it's like, you get a B on a test that you thought was really hard, and they're
Right.
like,
Yeah, my mom would
it's
be
not an
like that
A.
too.
Yeah,
She'd be
yeah,
like,
right.
she'd be like, "Why wasn't it an A?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Mom." She's like, "Well, why wasn't it an A plus?" I'm like, "I don't know, Mom. It just wasn't."
Exactly. That is 100% the same thing I experienced. I think a lot of people our age experienced that for sure. There was a lot of
Yeah.
putting expectations on kids.
Yeah, I
So,
find that. Yeah, I kind of find that with like some of the boomer generation and the silent gen before them.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to talk. I know mental health is very
No, go
important,
ahead.
especially to people in our generation. But
Hmm.
so how did you get into horror?
Well, I think I have to like think about how far this goes back. So initially, when I was a little kid, I did watch a good amount of television because television in the 80s was a real good babysitter
Yeah,
for
80s and
people.
90s.
Yeah, definitely. So I watched a lot of TV and I loved it. So I became a
Yeah,
very visual person.
yeah.
And I remember watching things like The Addams Family or The Munsters or even Scooby Doo. Like a lot of people don't think about it, but Scooby Doo was very horror oriented.
Oh wow. I need to go
So
back and rewatch it.
yeah, so I would really love those types of things. But then at the same time, like my parents didn't want us watching things that were too bad, so like we couldn't watch like horror movies or anything like that, even though we were getting some of these horror elements in these shows.
Yeah.
So that just kind of like whet my appetite. And then when I got older, especially when I got into college, I was like, oh man, I started running into friends. There's actually like one friend in particular, I told him this. I'm like, you were very influential on me in college because he showed me The Shining and he showed me Evil Dead for the first time. And it just like from there, it just blew up. I was just basically like, wow, these are amazing movies. And then it just made me want more and more and more and more and more. So
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of really started to get into it in college.
yeah, definitely. But
Oh,
I always had this issue of feeling like because the way I was raised, that it was kind of taboo to like horror movies,
yeah, yeah.
and especially to be like open about that because it's
Mhm.
material that's very dark. It seems really messed up, and there are people out there who don't understand the draw to it. And so it feels like you're going to be judged potentially if you let people know this stuff. But obviously, when I wear things like this Tremor shirt, like over time, I've just kind of, I think this is just a normal part of aging. Like you just start caring less what other people think.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Want to prioritize being happy with your own life because life is short,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah,
100%.
my parents were the tough. They were opposites of each other. I got into horror because of my dad. So
Oh,
like we
really?
would watch like made for TV Stephen King movies and
Oh,
Tales from the
nice.
Crypt and amazing stories, and I liked watching that show In Search of. I think it was narrated by Leonard Nimoy if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yep.
And what's the other? Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. I loved watching that as a kid. And my mom hated horror, like no matter how old I was, it's like she was one of those parents that's like, why do you have to watch all that gross stuff?
Yeah. Well, and my mom was that way too, but it's so funny because like she will then tell me that she like caught a part of a horror movie on TV and she just watched the whole thing because it was
Oh.
interesting.
Huh?
But she'll still maintain that she doesn't like horror at all and that she doesn't understand how people are into it. I'm like,
Yeah.
you like horror, you're just afraid to say it.
So what are your favorite horror subgenres? Because I think that's
Ooh,
something that a lot of people don't know. In fact, there was this girl recently on TikTok. Her video kind of blew up, and it was kind of interesting seeing the different interpretations people had of her video. I took what she was saying seriously. Like she's one of those types of people that was just genuinely like asking people why they like horror, why they like to be
sure.
scared, why they like the gross stuff. And I think that people who aren't really into horror, they kind of just have this sweeping generalization that all horror movies are exactly the same, so they don't realize
Right.
about the subgenres.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as far as subgenres go, they're not a lot that I'm like super duper drawn to. There are a few though. Giallo is one subgenre that I love. I think I call that like my comfort subgenre. Like those are the movies I want to watch when I just want to like feel cozy and warm and like, nostalgic, like I've been here before type thing. They're a comfort genre for me. Love the Italian um landscapes that they show, or cityscapes typically, and the architecture that it shows in those films. And then also, you always have a black gloved killer, so it's this great mystery of who's the killer going to end up being by the end of the film. And they always have ridiculous, over the top, quirky characters. So there are just so many interesting, fun things from the giallo subgenre that get thrown together in a blender that just makes it really work for me. They're not like typically good films, but they're fun films, and I just have a great time with them. Even the bad ones, I find enjoyment in. And I'd also say another subgenre I really enjoy is horror comedies, which there really aren't that many, but when you find good horror comedies, they're gold. They're pure gold. Like, something like The Burbs, or the first two Scary Movies. Those are good. Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
I
That's a
still need to
wonderful
watch
one.
those. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you have to watch it. It's so good. Even my wife likes that one, and
Yeah.
she's not really into horror, but yeah. And even like a more recent one, like Scare Package, I think
Yeah,
is
that
a
was
Shudder
good.
original.
Yeah,
That one
yeah.
was a good kind of horror comedy.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think those are kind of my two major genres that I'm super drawn to,
Yeah.
if the films are like decent. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, yeah, I love horror comedies too. That's how I initially got into horror when I was a kid. Aside from watching the movies like with my dad. Like I love my first favorite cartoon and movie probably was Beetlejuice.
Oh yeah,
So
great movie, great movie.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, horror comedies are the best. It's always
Yeah,
like whenever people are curious about horror, but they're not sure how intense they want to go, I always recommend that they start with horror comedies first, just
yeah.
to dip their toe in and
Well, that's
see.
a good idea. It,
Yeah.
it does seem like kind of the gateway subgenre.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what I love about Joe Bob too, actually, because I don't know how much the audience knows this, but one of the things that we've connected on is about watching the last drive,
Yep.
and I really appreciate the fact that this year on the show, Joe Bob has actually shown a couple of movies that I was previously
Oh
afraid
yeah,
of when I was a kid.
that's
What's the
cool.
first one? Dr. Giggles,
Oh yeah, that's fun.
and oh, what's the name of the other one? Toxic Avenger. In
Oh
fact,
yeah.
I used to have nightmares about toxic, like that
Really?
transformation scene when I was a kid.
Wow.
And like I liked the cartoon I could deal with, but I couldn't deal with the film. But it was
What?
really awesome that Joe Bob showed those films, and he interrupts the movie throughout and interjects his knowledge and some comedic flair, and kind of holds your hand through the movie if it is something that you might be a little nervous about watching.
Yeah. It's
Um,
great. It's a lot of fun.
yeah. Do you have like any specific decades of horror that are your favorite?
Whew. So when I first got into horror, I was kind of in this mindset with film in general that I just wanted to watch what was newer, because for some stupid reason in my mind, like older films aren't going to be as good. I had that feeling about it. And I think there are plenty of people who feel that way. But then over time, I just started opening my mind up a little bit more. So then I started going back further in like 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, like just going back as far as possible, basically. But I think like everyone talks about how much they love the 80s. Like 80s horror output was pretty great. They were green lighting pretty much anything to get done. So you got a lot of wild concepts, just really over the top stuff that's super, super fun. But I think that kind of when it comes to like being the wild, wild west of horror, the 70s is where there are a lot of great films that are pretty underappreciated and underseen. And I think that I kind of have gravitated a little bit more to 70s as kind of my favorite horror movie era. Although I love the 80s. And actually, I do want to say too that a lot of people say that like the 90s was like a wasteland when it came to horror films, but that's not really true. People just, I don't think, are looking hard enough because there really are a lot of fun and awesome 90s horror films.
Yeah, that's that's definitely something I see on a lot of the message boards and stuff is people just not really having a wide knowledge of horror, and so, they
Yeah.
kind of tend to quickly just go to, oh, there are no more original movies anymore.
Yeah, that too. Even though there are like a
Yeah,
ton.
you gotta look for them.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and
yeah.
I have some buddies from college who I play video games with online still
Mhm.
every week. And these guys, they'll ask me every now and then, like, what good horror movies are you watching? And almost all the time, like, I'll tell them the movies, and they're like, I've never even heard of it. I have no idea. But you really, honestly, don't need to look that hard
Okay.
to find the movies.
Yeah.
It's just people just have a tendency, unless you're like super into horror movies, people just have a tendency to know about what's in the news, basically, or what's showing at the theater, and
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
Yeah, what they've seen advertised on their phone or on TV or
Yeah.
whatever. Do you also go to like local horror film festivals and conventions and things like that?
No, see, I had done Monster Mania horror convention for
Mhm.
some years, and then COVID hit, and then obviously like no one was doing that stuff. And then I haven't gone back yet. I think part of it has to do with how busy I am in my everyday life.
Mhm.
Um, I would like to go back though, because it was always a lot of fun going and just feeling like you're a part of this gigantic group of people that we're all there for the same reasons, and meeting celebrities is always a lot of fun. But yeah, I haven't been there in a while, but I do really like it, so I need to get back.
Yeah, yeah, I always love like the one time a year the horror community is here for a convention.
Yeah, yeah,
So like I know you do, and I know you were saying you do a lot of like shorts. I need to look into getting doing YouTube shorts myself.
yeah.
But mostly you do a lot of horror reviews. So what is like your and I know consistency is a big part of one of the things that people say when when they try to give advice on starting a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So like how many reviews do you tend to record and post a week?
So it varies how many I do in a week, depending on how busy I am with other things. Some weeks I do a lot of videos, and usually that's counting like shorts as well.
Mhm.
But other weeks, I have other things going on, so I barely do any. So I'm always working ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually did figure out, like, you know what? Since I have all these extra videos I've already recorded ahead of time, why don't I create like memberships for my channel? And then
Mhm.
that way, if people are really, like, really don't want to wait, then you can pay a small fee and then you can see them. All the ones that are currently scheduled that aren't really released, you can see them whenever you want and watch them. But what I release though, my release schedule, I release a video every single day of every single week.
Mhm.
And this is where shorts really have been good for me because I used to do like 4 long form videos each week
Right.
of movie reviews, and that just ended up becoming too much of a time commitment for me. So I stepped that back to 3 larger videos. So on Mondays, I'll release a no spoiler movie review. On Wednesdays, I'll release a a horror related video or sometimes another movie review, but I do like collaborations with my friend, your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete. So our collaboration videos are always on Wednesdays, and then on Saturdays I release another movie review or a movie haul video if it's like Vinegar Syndrome or Severin or something like that. And then Tuesday and Thursday I release uh taste testing videos for the Universal Yum snacks that I get in the mail. And then Fridays and Sundays I release shorts that are um short movie reviews. That it's usually about a physical release. It's not just about the movie itself. It's about like the special features on the physical release and
Oh,
all
no.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do think you're talking about you want to kind of look into shorts. I think they're really good for getting people to find your channel. That's what I think they're most beneficial for. You like in comparison to a normal size video,
Right.
if you're monetized, like you're gonna make like pretty much nothing off of your shorts. But it has a good chance of getting people to understand that you exist, and maybe they'll look at some of your other stuff. But
Right, right. Now, are the YouTube shorts kind of limited to like 60 seconds? Because I know that's
yeah,
what kind of makes
yeah,
me a little nervous. I tend to do like TikTok videos and I'll say they're going to be 10 minutes when really they might just be like 3 minutes, but I just want to make sure I have that
yeah,
time if need be, you know.
yeah. There is, and it's interesting because there is like a pressure aspect to doing those.
Mm.
Because you know that you have a ticking clock in front of you, and it's only 60 seconds, which really is not a whole lot of time
Oh
to
no.
say everything you want. There are literally videos that I'll do that are shorts where like I started off relatively slow and I'm just kind of talking about something, and then I hit like 50 seconds in and my brain starts to panic because I'm like, I have a bunch of other stuff that I need to say. So I just start talking faster to try and just like shove it in at the end of the video. It's hard, but
And I can't see the clock. And if it were an audio clock that
right,
was counting down
right.
the seconds, that would make me nervous.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. It's
So what advice would you have for someone who's looking to start a YouTube channel?
I think the most important thing I would say is don't do it because you want to be successful. Because the overwhelming majority of people, I'd say probably 99% of people who create YouTube channels are not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to make it your job. Just do it because you are enjoying doing the videos. And if it ever gets to a point where you're just not enjoying it and it feels like it's work and you're just, like the amount of work it feels like versus how much you're having fun with it is out of kilter, then either change how you're doing things or just stop because it's not worth the stress. And honestly, like the amount of success you're going to end up with is going to be so minuscule that you have to do the channel for you. You cannot do it for anyone else. It has to be for your pure enjoyment. And once it's not fun anymore, just know you're not going to blow up and be this huge success and make all this money. Because even when your channel gets monetized, you are not making much money. So I
Yeah,
think that's my biggest thing.
and I feel like the audience can kind of tell when people are or aren't having fun with what
Yeah.
they're posting.
Yeah. Well, and I will be honest that there were times that I was recording videos and putting them out that I wasn't having a good time.
Mm.
But I was just doing it because I kept myself pushing through. And a big part was during the pandemic.
Right.
Just really just feeling like it was the routine that I had to do. And I was also dealing with a lot of, anxiety and depression problems at that point. So there are literally some videos you can find on my channel where I start having a panic attack during a review
Oh my
and just try
God.
to power through it. And
Yeah.
actually, I think I was pretty successful a lot of times when I started having that panic attack in like
Oh.
getting things back on track and trying to, right the ship and not have people recognize it too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those you might be able to tell. It's some of those.
Oh. Huh. So let people know where they can find your channel and
Yeah,
any
just
other
my
social media you might want them to follow you on.
yeah, my name's down here, Carlin Cook. Just yeah, it's that name. It's just my name because I'm just some guy. You know, I'm not like some brand or anything that I'm putting out there. It's just me, Carlin Cook, some dude talking about movies and some other stuff that I like.
Yeah.
As far as social media goes, I don't really do much of anything engagement wise with social
Mm.
media.
Mm.
I do have an Instagram that I just started that I put a little bit onto, and that's just Carlin Cook Horror.
Mm.
So you can find it there.
I just thought of one other thing though. Since it is spooky season, do you have any recommendations of movies that you'd recommend people check out?
Ooh, okay. Well, I did just recently watch Longlegs, the Oz Perkins film with Nicolas Cage in it and Micah Monroe. Really great. Loved it. Love everything Oz Perkins does. It just reduced in price through Fandango at Home for streaming rental. So it was like $20 for quite a while. It's down to $10 now. So
Oh,
now's the time. Jump on that one. It's a great film. I would also highly recommend from this year A Quiet Place Day One. It's the third installment in the Quiet Place franchise, so you would think probably diminishing returns, but they did a phenomenal job with the story in that film. It really surprised me. And then the third one, I'd say, I'll just go with three. One of my favorites of the year, I saw the TV Glow, which I know at the moment when we're recording this is available to stream on Max if you have Max streaming service. A wonderful, amazing film that made me feel so many things. This is a film that a lot of people are saying will define a whole generation of horror film watchers, and I can see that definitely. And it's PG-13, but it's a phenomenal film, and the impact that the ending of that film has, it's amazing. I haven't felt like that with a film in a long time, and it's wonderful. So those would
that's
be
a
my recommendations.
that's a great note to close on. Thank you so much for spending time being on the channel this afternoon.
No, thank
Thank
you.
everybody who's watching. Please give this video a like. Go to Carlin's channel, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.